Rangefinders are some of the most popular street photography cameras for their precision and unique framing capabilities. But even with some of the best tools of the trade, you're often only afforded one chance to capture the decisive moment. What happens when you take that concept to the extreme and use a custom 4x5 interchangeable lens rangefinder camera for street photography? I'm David, and this is the whole picture. If you only get one shot, why not go big? This thought had been in my mind for quite some time as I gradually stepped up my street photography cameras from a half-frame Olympus pen to a Leica to a Mamiya 6. So I felt like the natural progression would be large format, and while in theory it's quite interesting, in practice many 4x5 cameras are large, heavy, and require the use of ground glass for framing, which then often means you need a tripod and makes them ill-equipped for constantly changing street scenes. So, while interesting on paper, it never seemed realistic until I stumbled upon this Polaroid LAN 110B customized by Polakin. This was not the first LAN camera I'd seen modified, but was the most minimalistic, maintaining the LAN's smaller size and rangefinder, while even adding an interchangeable lens system. On paper, it offered some of the best qualities of my other rangefinders I had used for street photography, while offering a much larger negative. Early results were impressive, and it was pretty wild to be able to carry the camera with a film holder pre-loaded in a relatively small bag or just on its own. But unfortunately, I found the camera to be cumbersome in practice. While smaller for a 4x5, it's still a large and heavy camera, and with the focus knob on the right side, it all felt very foreign, especially with no dedicated shutter button, so the experience was very cumbersome and clunky, despite it looking like a promising camera on paper and in photographs. Ergonomics aside, there are plenty of other issues with this camera, but seeing as not many people will pick up this exact modification, I'll just briefly mention some points that I feel are relevant for those interested in a similar camera and move on to talking about the street photography project I took with this camera. The most interesting aspect of this modification ended up being one of its biggest downsides. The camera was originally a fixed lens camera with this 127mm f4.7 lens, so the rangefinder shows only those frame lines and would have been accurate out of the factory, but in making this an interchangeable lens camera, I feel like every time I switched lenses, it was necessary to adjust the rangefinder for the best accuracy, reducing my confidence when the stakes are so high. This drove me to use the wider 90mm f6.8 lens, which would provide a larger depth of field, and with some calibration or pre-focusing using the ground glass, I found that I was able to consistently get results that I wanted. But this hyperfocal distance style was a far cry from what I initially expected from this camera, and also presented its own challenges. Large format cameras need a lot of light, and I didn't anticipate just how difficult it would be to achieve handheld shutter speeds, even in the hot and sunny summers here in Japan. This forced my hand a bit, and I decided to push process the film, which also lent the images a unique look I would continue to use on future projects. The entire project was also photographed in a vertical orientation, which I chose because it suited the city, but also because it's rare to see when it comes to 4x5 photographs. Printing this project was also very interesting. Like my other projects, I wanted to show beyond the full frame of the photo, but unfortunately that wasn't an option with the enlarger I was using. So I went in the other direction and made contact prints with a mask, so each print is exactly the same size as the original negative. I have some more thoughts on this approach that I'll get to in a little bit. Unfortunately, I had quite a few issues with light leaks ruining a good percentage of my photos. Luckily, I feel like the strongest images did survive and I managed to get a project out of this, but it was kind of the final nail in the coffin that made me question whether this was worth the effort or not. In the end, and for my use, it's hard to justify continuing to use this 4x5 camera, but that's not to say that it wasn't worth experimenting with, and I do have some takeaways from my experience with this camera. With advancements in AI being a hot topic now, I can see a future where having a negative of this size that can stand alone as a one-of-one piece has tremendous cultural and artistic value. And with the democratization of tools for 3D modeling and printing, it's exciting to think about the possibilities of a compact yet capable 4x5 camera being designed and 3D printed. But for those that are interested in this kind of thing, you don't have to wait, and we can look to the past, where reporters used large format press cameras with flash bulbs to take handheld photographs in the early 1900s, and there are some photographers continuing these traditions to this day. If flash isn't for you, something like the Cambo Wide could be a more reliable solution for handheld 4x5 images. But I think my biggest takeaway from this whole experience was our need to reflect on why we pick equipment like this in the first place. In the modern day, it's very easy to jump straight to the most extreme gear, but I fear we rarely ask ourselves what that equipment can do for our work. And I know as photographers, it's very easy to make justifications on why we, quote unquote, need to have certain gear. But if we have equipment at the moment that works for us, I think we need a more concrete reason to change beyond just it's better. There is no better in photography. There's only a point at which you're willing to compromise. Anyways, I hope you found the video interesting or informative. I have a lot more thoughts when it comes to 4x5 cameras, negatives as art, as well as the importance of analog photography during the AI age. So get subscribed to see that. I'm David, and this is the whole picture.